again, thank you very much. And thank you, Linda, for giving me this pen. We're going to talk about climate change, but poverty, immigration, and refugees are integral to climate change. And we have to solve all of them as one big piece. And so I'm very grateful to be here to talk a little to you about what the climate impacts are in our region and in your community in Pennsylvania, and this region of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, to just bring you up to speed about the fact that we are already feeling those impacts in little ways and in big ways. So first slide. So I wanted to start with just what is climate and what is weather, okay? Because the next few slides are going to be talking about what the changes in our climate have been over the last few years. So weather is what's happening outside right now. And climate is, take 30 years of the weather that we're having today and average them out, and that's what climate is. It's an average of 30 years worth of weather data for every day of the year. And what we're seeing is that our climate is changing, and that's because the weather is changing every day, even if we don't necessarily notice it. And it's changing in many, many ways that are detrimental to the way we live. Next one. So climate impacts many, many different aspects, and you can just see them right there. The changing the rain and snow patterns, the annual migration life cycles of birds and other animals, less ice and snow in the mountains, so that affects people who get their water from runoff, stronger storms, higher temperatures, droughts, wildfires, the thawing permafrost in the northern part of our country and in colder regions like Canada and Alaska. It's damaging coral, it's infecting sea level rise, warmer oceans mean bigger storms, and more acidification causes some really bad problems with sea life. Hundreds of millions of people get their protein from the ocean, and that's being impacted as well. So it's happening everywhere, and now we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Pennsylvania. Next slide. So you can see that this is a graph which charts from 1970 to 2018. So that's 48 years. So this is showing you that the climate is changing because climate is the average of 30 years worth of data, right? So what you're seeing is that our temperature has risen in Pennsylvania 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 1.6 degrees Celsius. Now, you may be aware that the United Nations has been studying climate, and they would like to hold the average temperature in the planet at 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're already at 1.6, and look at that trajectory. We're going to be getting a lot hotter in Pennsylvania, and that's going to impact everything that we do, agriculturally and in every other way. Next slide. One of the things that is happening is that we have more days of extreme heat, and you can't really see the blue little dots that I have. That's us right there. So we're actually in a pink dot. The blue dots are a little bit south of us. And what's interesting, the blue is actually getting cooler and the reds are getting warmer. So it's not even, climate change is weird. Some things get a little better and some get a lot worse, right? So we're actually a pink dot, a bunch of pink dots in Pennsylvania. And what this means is that we have at least 10 more days of very extreme hot weather. So what does that impact? It impacts any worker who's working outside. Any person who's putting up the telephone poles or doing construction work like I used to do, agricultural laborers, farmers, you name it. If you're outdoors, if you have children or if you play sports, you can be impacted by those things. It increases our electricity bills because that's when we get home from work, we flip on the AC. It affects our transportation. It melts the streets. It buckles the roads, right? It impedes emergency response. There are many, many ways that we are being affected already. And that always means more cost to our municipalities, to our family budgets, those kind of things. Okay. Another thing that's changing is because our area is getting warmer. Now you can see these are these dots are for the top 10, but you can see Philadelphia is right there in the center, right? So we know that we're impacted by these increases. So what's happening? Our seasons are getting longer, so that we have more insects like mosquitoes earlier in the spring and later in the fall. And so that means that we are more susceptible to viruses, mosquito-borne illnesses like Zika virus, which is now coming up from the south and coming to Pennsylvania. Also, this is very true of tick-borne diseases. There are new varieties of ticks that are coming up from the south that are now endemic to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the #1 hotspot for Lyme disease in the world. We have more people in Pennsylvania getting Lyme disease, and we're getting it later in the season. Ticks will come out when the temperature is 40 degrees or hotter. So it could be Christmas Day. If we have a 40 or 45 degree day like we're going to have tomorrow, it's going to be 59. Ticks are out, and they're able to pass on these diseases. People don't think about that because they think it's cold, they think the bugs went away. Not true. Here's a chart. Starts in 1950, goes to 2018. That's 68 years. This is the change of our climate. This has to do with the wettest day of the year. Well, you can see that we're getting more wetter days with much more rain. And my wife Susan is a farmer, and she has this nice farm over here in Marsville, Falls Township. They noted last year they had so much rain in the spring that farmers throughout the region, not just here, but throughout the East Coast, could not get their tractors onto the farmland for 6 weeks. They were 6 weeks behind. This is devastating for people who make their money through growing food. And then in the fall, they had the same problem. The rains came early, and it was very hard to harvest, and it was then very hard to plant their crops that they plant in the fall that they can harvest during the colder months. So it's little things like this that aren't so little, that really are impacting everything that we do and we see. So those are just a couple of different things that we can talk about. There are many, many other aspects. The state of Pennsylvania does a climate impact assessment every 3 years. And in June of 2018, their most recent document was publicized. And they look at the energy sector, human health, forestry, agriculture. There's actually 6 or 7 different emphases that they look at. And we are having changes in every single one of those things. So if you have an interest in agriculture or asthma or any of those kind of things, there's plenty of data out there that shows that climate change is impacting Pennsylvania very seriously, and something that we really need to be aware of. Next slide. So I'm going to just take a quick segue into the 2 ways that we need to think about how are we going to cope with this, right? And one is, and the thing that we are all doing already, is adaptation. So what is adaptation, right? Okay. So if I have 2 more weeks of mosquitoes, then I adapt by buying an extra bottle of bug spray, right? So now we're spending a little bit more money on bug spray, right? Or, I bought the special socks that I wear when I go out in my yard that repels ticks. And so I wear them more often because I'm outside more often as the weather stays warm. So we make these adaptations on a regular basis and we don't really think about it. But it comes to the point where you really need to think about, well, we can only adapt so much, right? So what we really need to do is stop the problem that's causing us to have to adapt, right? And that's called mitigation. So we know we're going to adapt, but if we really want to have a planet that is going to be able to be survivable, you know, for our grandchildren, then we really need to work on the mitigation side, which is working with our politicians to provide laws that are going to reduce the amount of pollution that's going into the atmosphere in the first place. So, so that's the kind of work that I do. Is on the mitigation side, we talk to every single congressional person in the Congress. So we go see all the House representatives and all the senators. We try to see them at least 8 times a year. So here I'm very familiar with Brian Fitzpatrick and his staff. On Tuesday, I'll be going down to Washington, D.C. with about 2,000 other people from around the country. And we will be going to Capitol Hill. We break up in groups of 5, and we take the message of our bill that we would like them to pass. And of the 535 offices, so there's 435 congressmen and 100 senators, so there's 535 offices. In one day, these little groups, we will see probably 520 offices in one day with this message. And this message is mitigation. We've got to stop the pollution from going in the atmosphere. And we have some information for you afterward if you'd like to look at what our bill is about. So let's turn to the next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about sea level rise, because that is something that is happening worldwide, as I'm sure you know, and it's going to be one of the major reasons that people have to leave their homes, and they have to, they're going to be moving to other parts of their country, or they're going to be moving to other people's countries. And so this is part of what Linda is involved with migration and refugees, and sea level rise is going to be a major, major cause of people who have to move. Fortunately, the science data has been refined so that we know better how damaging sea level rise is going to be. Unfortunately, our predictions have been low, really low. And so we're noting that sea level rise is going to be happening much faster, and the problems are going to be much more egregious in terms of the inundation that's going to be caused by the rising high tides. What is sea level rise? It means that the high tide level on any given day is going to be higher and higher and higher. And we're going to have to really think about, as a society, how we are going to move people off the coast and deal with the conflicts that come when different people come into our communities and want to live with us. We're going to have to open our arms and really embrace this, and that's going to be another reason to talk with our leaders and to be leaders ourselves in our community, to make sure that we can be a welcoming community, and we can figure out how we're going to feed and house and educate ourselves and them. So just a real quick thing, I'll just go through these really fast. You can see that the Arctic ice is melting, and that's because the planet is warming a lot faster in the Arctic. It's about 4 to 8 degrees hotter as opposed to where we have 2.4 degrees. So you can see that the line of where it says 2019, that the thickness of the ice it's much thinner, and that's because a lot of it is melted. And that's happening on a recurring basis. So the next slide. The other thing that's happening is that as the cool water from the the fresh water from the glaciers and the ice pack on Greenland and in the Arctic, as that melts, it flows into the ocean, and that's causing the Atlantic conveyor belt to actually slow down. And that means that it also is contributing to sea level rise. Because what happens is when the warm water goes north, which is that orange line, as it passes along the Atlantic coast and goes towards Europe, it actually pulls the water away from the coast of the United States. But as it slows down, it pulls less water, so the water is rising. And so that's one of the aspects of sea level rise. Isn't that bizarre? That as you slow something down, it pulls, I mean, it's bizarre, but these are these kind of crazy things that are happening that we don't really understand well. Next one. This shows mean high tide. This is high tide right now. So that first says was the first column. That's the mean high tide. That's where we are in terms of what the level of the ocean is right now. But as you go towards the left, it shows what the mean high tide will be based on if we actually just continue to do whatever we're going to be doing. And that would be the far left. And that would put us around 7 feet of sea level rise. If we go towards if we do what we need to do and make much lower emissions of pollution into the atmosphere, we might be able to be around 5 to 6 feet of sea level rise. We're already locked in. And if we really work hard and we eliminate pollution in the atmosphere, we're still going to be in the 3 to 5 foot range in terms of sea level rise. So 4 feet of sea level rise on the Jersey Shore is going to take out everything from Cape May to New York City. All those cities, all those towns, they're going to be gone. And this is going to be 2050 to 2100 is when this is going to be happening. So refugees and immigration, we're going to have refugees from foreign countries like New Jersey. Yeah. And they're going to be coming right to Bucks County. I'm not kidding. Or Philadelphia. Let's take a look at a couple more slides. I'll show you. This is Philadelphia, right? We are, if the average temperature gets up to 1.5 degrees Celsius, this is the flooding in Philadelphia that's going to happen. The airport is down here. If we get to 2 degrees, it just makes matters worse. And this is where all the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the airports, everything, our power plants, the oil refineries, all these things are going to be impacted. And those are going to impact us really big time. Next slide. Keep it out of my thing here. So here is one that shows the New Jersey coast, just to give you a little bit more. This would be at 4 feet of sea level rise. And the blue along the New Jersey coast is everything that's flooded. So we're pretty much locked in at a minimum of 4 feet by 2100. Now I mentioned my daughter Rachel a minute ago because she's about to have my first grandchild. About 10 years ago, she and I were having a dad-daughter conversation, and she told me that when she was 30, she was going to have her first child. And at that moment, I've talked to Nancy about this. At that moment, I had this intense feeling of just like, it's almost like fizzy electricity going into my body. And coming out of the Episcopal Church is where I grew up. I know a lot about the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost came into my body. And it kind of informed me that I was going to be working on climate change and energy efficiency stuff for the rest of my life. And now that Rachel is pregnant and age 30, she's very organized. I realized back then when this happened, when the Holy Ghost came into my body, And she made me realize that just like this, that my granddaughter is going to be 80 years old in the year 2100. So we are in a situation where if we continue doing what we're doing, even if we reduce the amount of pollution that we're putting in the atmosphere, we are still locked into those trajectories that you saw on those slides. And that's the thing that's, really motivating me to talk about these issues, because as a community, we need to solve this. One of the things that I didn't realize when I started this work was that it comes with a lot of despair. And I know there's a lot of despair in the Bible, a lot of people feeling despair in the Bible. And I didn't realize that I was going to feel that way too. But it's when I get with groups like you, and I meet people like Linda and Suze and other people who are really committed to changing our planet and changing our community for the better, and are willing to put the hours in and the time in to do that. It's then that despair is dissipated, and that I know we can do this, we can move forward. But I really feel it when I see those. I read a lot. I see these slides with the trajectories in it. It really freaks me out. So I'm going to stop now, because I've had my 20 minutes is up. But I just wanted to say that each of us can be involved in making change. The number one most important thing that you can do about climate change is talk to other people about it. Talk to your neighbors or your kids or your family and just mention it. Just mentioning it gets it into their head, and they start to learn about what they need to do. The other thing is to call your congresspeople and call your senators. And Sue says it's okay for me to tell you that Citizens Climate Lobby has an initiative where during the 30 days from November 12th until December 12th, we are going to be calling every congressperson and senator in the United States, their constituents, and we're inviting individuals to sign up so that individual like me would get an email on a certain day within that month, and they would be asked to make one call that one day to their senators and their congressperson and say your name, where you live, that's to identify you as a constituent, and that you would like them to pass legislation about climate change. Specifically our legislation, but you can learn about that in the back. And if you would just do that one thing, then we will have a minimum of 100 people calling that month, because we're going to get at least 5 people each day to call. And I can tell you that we believe that people are good, and we believe that politicians are good, and that if they recognize and know that their constituents in mass, groups and groups of people, want them to do something, ultimately they will do it. And that's what we're counting on. So if you'd like to sign up, there is a sign-up sheet in Sue's house, and we can do that at the end of this service today. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I really appreciate it.